according to Harris Benedict, I am supposed to be burning 2,200 calories. I have not been eating that. So that's just showing you from a health standpoint, your health is going to struggle if you are not eating at least what the Harris Benedict says is your basal metabolic rate or your daily energy expenditure for specific periods of time. A lot of people spend a good portion of their life trying to achieve fat loss. A lot of us not the happiest with our physique, and that we feel that if we continue to follow this path of trying to achieve fat loss, that we will eventually achieve these results. And a lot of the time, the reason people get super biased to performing this or stay in long-term calorie deficits is because in the beginning we got results, right? Let's say we were really obese or we just want to lose a little bit. In the beginning, we got some great results. We lost a bit of fat. We were like a lot happier with our physique. But then eventually we stopped getting those results. So what are you told? A caloric deficit is how you achieve fat loss. So you just kept driving calories down further and further and further, not really getting where we want to be, and eventually leading to like a lot of health complications, whether that be mental or physical. So I made this graph here. I've done something like this before, but I'm going to elaborate a little differently on this here, and show like what kind of happens when you constantly push for fat loss and how we can kind of negate that in simplistic terms. And so what I have here on the board is this is calories. So this will be your intake of calories. Then I have your daily energy expenditure, pretty self-explanatory. We're going to put everything in as a whole. So your movement, your talking, your walking, your exercise, thermogenesis, you name it, that all goes in there. Your BMR, which is your basal metabolic rate, that is how many calories you burn a day simply just breathing, not doing anything. You can figure this out using a Harris Benedict equation. Then we're going to talk your thyroid and hormones. And the reason I have thyroid and hormones in here is because thyroid is your chief regulator of your metabolism. In terms of fat burning, optimal thyroid is what's going to greatly promote fat burning. And then when you talk about hormones, them as well, right? You look at testosterone, you look at progesterone and estrogen, very crucial for the fat loss aspect. But they are heavily impacted by trying to achieve fat loss. So, we come in and we decide, okay, we want to lose some weight. We want to burn some fat. So I need to reduce my calories. So looking over time here, we're going to go, okay, well, I need to initially drop my calories. So we're going to start dropping them and, calorie deficit. We lose some weight this week. All right, well, let's drop them a little further. So this is kind of how people's caloric intake looks over the years. Okay. Or we'll say this is in like months. Okay. So this is kind of what's happening here is the caloric intake is going down. So let's say they're at 2,000 and now they're at like, 1,400 coming down here. So yes, caloric deficit, achieve fat loss, but what is happening with this process is your body will adapt to anything. It's a miraculous meat suit. It's designed to adapt. And so it will adapt to this reduction in calories. And how it does that is, one, it will decrease your daily energy expenditure. So you'll find yourself like moving less, you'll be less motivated, talking less, fidgeting less, wanting to go to the gym less, all these kind of things. This is why like all those motivational videos and everything are like get your butt to the gym and do your cardio and stuff, because it's promoting movement that it can be really difficult to do in a caloric deficit because it matches. So like you're starting up here kind of thing, and then as your calories start to drop, this kind of matches it, which is one of the reasons why we feel the need to continue to decrease calories more and more and more. That is one aspect. Now, basal metabolic rate, research has shown that it's not super affected unless it's like very long term, which I actually see the case a lot. When I'm talking long term, I'm talking like a year, and you meet many people who have been trying to achieve fat loss for a year straight. Some people 5 years, and maybe not trying to achieve fat loss, just not eating optimal calories, constantly putting themselves in a caloric deficit. And so over time, like this can start to come down as well. Okay. And so this will result in like muscle tissue loss. You can lose connective tissue, bone, all that kind of stuff with very chronic diet. This is why you don't want to be a chronic dieter. because you can really destroy your basal metabolic rate, take away from your organs, all that kind of stuff, right? So now, when you are in a caloric deficit, you are going to be releasing more cortisol, and cortisol is going to heavily impact your thyroid negatively. It's going to lessen the conversion from inactive to active. It can convert from active to reverse T3, which is inactive but takes up space on the nucleus. And so your overall thyroid output is going to come down as well over time, okay? And hormones, not only are you burning through these hormones with your training and whatnot, but you are also not providing enough of the necessary substrate while in a caloric deficit to rebuild these hormones. So things like fat, for example, because we got to lower that stuff. So what goes down? Hormones. Okay. Now, on top of all this, your ability to deal with everything else as well, rebuilding neurotransmitters, flushing toxins and heavy metals, you name it, all this stuff declines. But it's not, don't look at it as declining, it's just adapting to this. Because if you lowered your calories, but your daily energy expenditure stayed up, and your thyroid stayed optimal, your hormones stayed optimal, you would wither away. You would eat away. You'd eventually probably start eating muscle tissue if you ran out of all your fat. So this is why the body doesn't do that. This is why people who run high amounts of thyroid medication, they can die for various other reasons as well. But they just eat through a lot of substrate, and then like exogenous hormones long term, right? People will do these long term to support trying to stay lean all the time, which can result in health complications. Like genetics play a big role. But so what we want to do to avoid the body from adapting too much or too fast, or adapting in the other direction, is this cyclical approach. So if you refer to, like I did a podcast on tips and strategies for fat loss, I've spoken lots about the metabolism adaptation. So essentially what you do is, let's say this is here let's actually start adding time frame now. Let's go in 3 weeks, okay? So we got 3, 6, 9, 12, 18, 21, 24. Let's just say it like that, okay? I would actually stop around here and do a longer maintenance, but it's hard pressed to find people willing to do that if they haven't reached their physique results by that time frame, okay? So we lower calories for the first 3 weeks, okay? We're only going to get a very minimal reduction in DE, your daily energy expenditure. BMR, it ain't going nowhere. BMR is not going anywhere, okay? Thyroid, we'll get a little bit, right? Thyroid will respond relatively quickly. You'll get a little bit, okay? Hormones, once again, you'll get a little bit. They'll respond relatively quickly, okay? But now, we hit that 3 week mark. Let's go up for the next 3 weeks, okay? So you're bringing your calories up. Realistically, it'd be more like this, is what we're looking at, okay? And then, you can guess where this is going. Your daily energy expenditure, you're going to come back up to baseline. Hell, you do enough calories, it might go up a little more, okay? BMR, all this stuff is going to be going up, right? So it's a cycle. It's the cyclical approach is how we really avoid that. Now, the thing is, though, that's not enough time. You're still going to get a constant, can't sort my freaking markers out here. You're going to get a constant, it's going to be like this, okay? It's going to get lower and lower. It's still going to end up lower than baseline over this time frame, even with a cyclical approach. But a lot better than that by staying just in a chronic caloric deficit. Same with this stuff, right? This is how everything's going to look, but it's still going to end up lower than baseline. So if someone's not really pushing for a deadline, and you're like me, and you got to have your brain in tune, you got to have your energy in tune. People's lives are literally relying on you. You don't need to be sleeping properly. You don't got time for prepping and fat loss all the time, right? What you want to do is, if you're here, okay, let's say you've only been eating 1,500 calories. This entire time frame, you want to be doing a surplus instead, okay? You want to be coming up instead, because you need to take the time to build muscle tissue. So, you take time to build muscle tissue. So, We got our BMR, okay, basal metabolic rate. In order to increase basal metabolic rate, you need to build muscle tissue. You're not necessarily going to make your liver and organs bigger unless, you're doing exogenous hormones, but that's not the goal. What we want to do is we want to build muscle, because now our basal metabolic rate is going to come up as well. Now, it's not going to be super significant unless you put on tons of lean tissue, but it is going to come up. But with the increase in food as well, your daily energy expenditure is going to come up. And so I recently just had Matthew Flynn on as a podcast guest, and that's what we talked about. You have to eat more because your daily energy expenditure is coming up. You're talking more, you're moving more, you're doing more, you're motivated to get things done as long as you're healthy, right? All that is increasing. Thyroid, right? Thyroid's coming up and you're building optimal hormones, okay? So this graph is just to illustrate. It's very basic and kind of like, not super intricate, but it's just, this is what should be obvious to people. And it's not, unfortunately. It's not, unfortunately, because there's still a mass amount of individuals out there promoting you need a caloric deficit to lose weight. And yes, there are people out there promoting you need to take the time to eat in a surplus. But the complication is, like I myself deal with lots of clients with hormonal issues, gut issues, thyroid issues. So it's not just as simple as increasing your calories. Because the thing is if you have a severe overgrowth and you increase your calories, you're going to feed into that overgrowth, which is going to create more inflammation, which is going to lower the thyroid and can negatively impact hormones. Okay? So it's a matter of getting into a healthy state first, but there are a lot of issues that can be resolved by simply just feeding up for an extended period of time. The problem is our attention span is so short that we spend years trying to lose fat and not being happy. So that when someone comes in and tries to tell us that, okay, we need to spend 16 weeks feeding you up, oh my God, it's the end of the world, right? When the reality is you've spent so much time doing the opposite and it's flown by like that. What's another 16 weeks, right? We seem to miss that picture. And so because we don't want to put up with potentially gaining some water weight, potentially, gaining some fat. Now, you don't have to go to those extremes of, pushing a bunch of food, trying to build muscle to gain, or in the process of gaining water weight and fat, because you can still bring up thyroid hormones with hovering around a maintenance caloric intake. So if you did, so yes, you can use the Harris-Benedict equation to figure out your basal metabolic rate. But if you've been eating, your basal metabolic rate and daily energy expenditure. So let's say it's saying you're burning 2,200 calories. Well, if you've only been eating 1,700, remember the graph, everything's going down. Okay. So if you go, oh, well, Harris-Benedict says to be eating 27 or 2,200, you might put on a lot of water weight, a lot of fat, a lot of bloat. Okay. So work up from what you have been eating. Okay. So if you've only been eating 1,300 calories, this is 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 2,000 calories. Okay, work your way up from there. This is why I don't always like using calculations for determining this stuff. It is based off of history. You can use calculations to understand that, okay, according to Harris-Benedict, I am supposed to be burning 2,200 calories. I have not been eating that. So that's just showing you from a health standpoint, your health is going to struggle if you are not eating at least what the Harris-Benedict says is your basal metabolic rate or your daily energy expenditure for specific periods of time. And so that's a good wake-up call, eye-opener for some people, because I have people who go they'll message me and they'll say, oh, I think this is a lot of food. I ate last time to lose weight. I say, well, ironically, you're here to lose weight because you're not losing weight, and this is why. This is exactly why. So we need to feed you up to where your body should optimally be to have a better response when we go into fat loss. So feeding yourself up is super important because it's going to promote the upregulation of all of this stuff, which is going to help you achieve fat loss better, but also work on a lot of health complications, because your body, everything needs fuel to run. Everything you can ever think of. Any, mental illness someone may have is going to need fuel to overcome that. Any physical pain, someone's going to need fuel to overcome that. The physical act of movement, you need fuel, right? The physical act of training, the process of building muscle requires fuel. Like everything is fuel. But if you're not providing that fuel, all these systems are going to take a hit, right? And then fat loss is not going to be achievable, right? You need to set yourself up where the body is in an optimal state to actually respond without adapting super fast. Because that's the thing too. If you've been doing this for an extensive period of time, you're going to adapt a lot less quickly than as if let's say you've been eating 1,300 calories and then you jump up to 2,200 calories for 3 weeks and then you go back, it's going to adapt super fast again. And that's another thing too that people don't understand, because you always hear it. You'll hear, oh, well, I did intermittent fasting, or I did keto, or I did carnivore, I did whichever, and I had good results. Well, your body adapted to that, and you didn't take enough time away from that, doing the right things to get away from that adaptation and adapt to a higher metabolism. So coming back to what you did before doesn't always work. It does for some, but it usually doesn't always work because the body has previously adapted to that. So it's all about tricking your metabolism, okay? Funky terms. But once again, quick recap is just, as you decrease calories, everything you see here on the board is going to decrease. Your daily energy expenditure, your basal metabolic rate, ever so slightly. I wouldn't be too worried about that unless you are going for extreme chronic periods like 6 months plus. Then you will see a reduction in basal metabolic rate. Thyroid, you can give yourself Hashimoto's, hypothyroidism, all these kind of things by chronically dieting. And you can completely take your hormones, lose your cycle, men lose your hair, like bone tissue, you name it, right? So you don't want to be chronically dieting. You want to be eating a sufficient amount of food for majority of the year, if not in a surplus, and then take the time. So 54 weeks in a year, maybe take 10 weeks and push an extreme cyclical deficit, and you'll get great results that way, okay? So once again, too, in the opposite spectrum, the more food you eat, the more all this is going to come up, promote health and wellness and a much easier environment, much better environment to achieve optimal fat loss. Okay. If you like that video, hit the like and subscribe button and follow me on Instagram at that.coach.curtis.